Here we go. So you guys have been working on textures in Unity. One of the things that I encourage you to do, and I think this is something that's very important to do, is to find textures online. The problem with that is oftentimes they look very flat. So if I go here, I've got my first-person controller in a simple terrain here. The terrain is very flat, and I've got this texture, which is actually huge. It really is too big, but it's all right. It'll suffice for the demo. But the texture is just too big. The rocks are too big for the scale. But if I hit play and take a look at it, you'll see that you can tell it's flat. You can tell it's on a very flat surface. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to learn how to generate normals maps for any textures that we have gotten off the internet. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. What I'm going to show you is the fast way, maybe not the best way, okay, but this is very simple. So one of the things that I do right away is I'm going to right-click on the texture that I have, and I'm going to say Show and Explore. Now if you notice, I've done something here, and I have actually two paths drawn side by side with the same texture. And this is going to be actually really important in just a second here as we start to compare the before and the after, just so that you can kind of get a sense of what it's actually going to do for us. So I'm going to right-click on here, and I'm going to say Show and Explore. I've got this in Explorer, and I'm going to keep that. I'm going to minimize Unity, and then I'm going to open up a program called SS Bump. I actually don't believe there's a shortcut in our start menus yet. Sorry about that. I haven't done that. The icon is on your desktop. Double-click. And it's going to open up a little window like this. You're going to go over here. There's height maps and normal maps. Height maps are usually used for terrains. They're not going to necessarily be the best thing for the textures here. So we're going to use normal mapping for this. Okay, so you're going to hit normal map. It's going to actually open a new window, which will recenter itself. And then we're going to go to the image file, and you're going to hit the little three dots. And you're going to navigate to your game design. I was already there, but I'm just showing assets, and you should have a folder, My Textures, or and then here is the image, the texture image that was downloaded off the internet that we're using. So now I've got that. So now I'm going to go over here where under it says where it says settings. This was a big confusion issue for me when I first started using this program, and that was it wouldn't save anything. Well, you need to add a settings set to it. So if I hit plus here, you'll see it says fine detail, medium detail, and large. And I'm going to save one out of each so that you can see the differences in something like this. And actually, in this case, this overly large scale of this texture may actually help us. So I'm going to click Fine and click OK. And so you'll see a setting there that says Fine. And then you'll have Blend Mode, which is going to leave it as is. You have Height Scale and Intensity. And they're very different. The height scale will literally try to stretch the texture and make it taller from its deepest, deep parts to its tallest tops. And this is actually really what we call, it's kind of an interpolation process. SS Bump is analyzing the JPEG that you're giving to it, and it's trying to figure out what the heights need to be. It's not necessarily going to do the perfect job. They make normals maps, and I wouldn't say necessarily by hand, but they alter them and make them in a lot more of an advanced way when you're talking about a real game or a real texture for an animation. But again, for something simple, this will do. And so for what we're doing, this will do quite well. So we have our normals map here, fine detail, and I'm going to take the height scale here, and I'm going to bump it up. Let's just bump it up to 50, because we're going to make this extreme. Most of the time when I do this, I find that I'm around 15 or 25 at the most. Okay, but I'm going to pop this up, and we'll make it more extreme. So once I do all that, and you can enhance the edges and stuff like that, and you can play with all this kind of thing, these kinds of things. What I recommend you do is when you save it, kind of record what you've done here in the name of the normal map, so that you have a sense of what you did. So what I'll do is I'll save it, and I'll just click here. I always make it a JPEG. Don't do all supported, that does not seem to work well. And don't save it over top of the original either. So what I'll do is I'll go normal, and then I'll say height 50, fine. And what else did I do here? And move this over. I didn't really change anything else, but if I changed anything else, I would kind of write it in there. So then I'll hit save, and it says it generates a normal map, and you can see, there it is, and if I click on it, you can see the normal map that's created there from the same thing. So let's go back to our normal map settings here, and I'm going to take the height map down to 25, and I'm going to save it again, and I'll click on this, and then just to get the name, and then I'll save it as 25. Click save, and it generates another one. And I'm only doing this experimentation just to show you guys some difference. If you have a sense of what you want to do, you don't have to save all these out, right? Okay, I'm just doing this to kind of show you what's happening. Both of these are on fine. Let's go, and instead of saving multiples, we'll just keep it at 25. And I'm going to add a new one that is a medium detail. Okay, we'll subtract the fine detail out of that. And so then I'll click save. Oops, now notice the height scale went back to 15. Let's put it back to 25. And I'll click save. I'm going to click here, height 25, and then I'm going to delete it and say medium. Make sure you're always saving them as JPEGs or PNGs. Nothing else seems to work very well with Unity in my experience. So save, generates a normal map. And so now you can see I've got another one here that's medium. And let's do one last one that is a large detail. Okay. Subtract the medium out of there. We've got large detail. Okay, we're just doing singles here like this. And I'm going up still at 25. Perfect. So I'm going to hit save. Click there. Height 25. And then I'll change the end to large. So now I'm going to have basically 4 normals maps that are 2 fine, one at 50 and one at 25 of a height, and then the others are all going to be 25 and medium and large. It's just so that we can see, okay? And I'll click save. The other thing that I do is when I'm doing this, I don't close SS Bump while I'm loading things into Unity, and the reason why I don't do that is because at least it saves my settings, and if I find that the image is not what I want it to be, then I can always go back to SS Bump as easily as possible to kind of make some changes, okay? So let's go back to Unity. It's going to load these 3 in. Now, it didn't do it correctly. Sometimes it will load them in as normals maps anyway. Sometimes it won't. I'm sure it has to do with how I've named the file. I haven't figured that out yet. I'm sure there's a way of making it do it, but there's also a way of manually changing it, so it's no big deal. But let's just let me show you how you know you didn't do it right. So I'm going to hit terrain. I'm going to go and I'm going to edit this texture. Excuse me. I'm going to edit this texture, and I'm going to hit select. And then down here, you'll see all these normals maps. And there's my normal, medium. Let's do our fine 50. Height 50, fine. OK. So I'm going to double click on that. And you'll see I've got a little caution light here, and the apply button is not dark, so it's grayed out. I can't click it. And it says normal texture should be imported as a normal map. So when I was trying to play with this, I realized, well, I didn't import it as a normal map. How do I do that? Well, all you have to do is you click on the texture, and in the inspector up here, it says texture type. And you can choose normal map. Ta-da! And once you do that, as soon as you do that, when you click on something else, it'll ask you if you want to apply. You hit apply. I don't see an apply button up here. Oh, there it is. It's down here at the bottom. So you can do that to all of them. So we're just going to make them normal maps, hit apply. And you'll notice that the preview goes away in the thumbnail. And I'm not sure why that is, but oh well. OK. Now we've got 4 black images here that don't show us any detail in the thumbnails, but if you select them, you can see what you're doing here. Now if I select my texture or my terrain, go to my texture and edit it, okay, I can add in the Unkempt stone, let's see, that's normal, height 25, fine. So let's just use this one. So double click and hit apply. Now, I think you can see the difference in what's happening. Now here's what's really cool, is this also responds to the directional light. So if I take my directional light and I rotate it, you can see how the bumps will change depending upon the direction that your light is coming from. See that? So you really see it there when I'm changing how the light goes across in the y-axis. So that's what's really neat about normals mapping, is normals mapping throws shadows essentially based upon your lighting. And you can really see the difference between the two textures. So on this right one, we have a texture which we do not have a normals map on. And then here we can see that the normals map is there. To further illustrate this point, I made a flat gray texture. If I click back on my terrain, I can go back to editing this texture. I'll leave the normals map on, but let me take the albedo off and just load in this gray, flat gray. And you can see how I've just got a flat gray here. You can see the shadows are coming from the normals map. And again, if I take the directional light and I start to rotate it, okay, you can see how it throws shadows based upon where the lighting is. So now let's take a look at a couple different things. So let's go back to our texture. I'm going to edit this. Let's put the correct albedo back in the texture here. So now I've got this. Apply. Let's take this texture here. So this one was, hold on a second, edit. Which one did I use here? I used that was the height of 25 on, shoot. Height of 25 on fine. Okay. So let's load in, edit the texture here. Let's load in the height of 25 on fine, or height of 50 on fine, I mean, sorry. So we're going to load our height of 50, and it tells you down here what that is. So we'll double click on this. This is our height of 50. Apply. And we can kind of see the difference that it's making. And you can really see it. It's way overdone here in the rocky areas. Okay? It's way overdone. In the rocky area there, it's just way too much. And this is the fine detail. So basically what that means is it finds every little edge and line and everything in the JPEG and makes it into some sort of a normal map. So let's take a look at the large. So if I take my textures and I edit this one again, let's go back and let's do our height of 25 large, apply. Now hopefully you can see how you have less detail in the rocks themselves, okay, on the right than on the left. So in this case, the large is working a lot better, I think, for me on this texture here to create something that's a little bit more lifelike. Again, this isn't the way that I think an expert would probably build a height map, or a normals map, sorry, not a height map. But at the same time, it seems to work pretty well. It would be interesting to do large at a height of 50. I think it would probably look too much. I think 25, generally speaking, is about as much as you want something to look. But if you consider what it looked like when you had nothing there, it's so much better. So if I just edit this texture again and get rid of this, okay, you can really see the difference between what it used to look like. And if I hit play and actually put my character down and just look down at the ground, the one on the right just looks so much better. And again, if you have lighting that's changing over the course of time or anything like that, it will completely change the way that texture looks because it's got something that's actually casting shadows. So that's really a very important technique, is putting normal maps on objects. And SS Bump is a really great way of doing it. I also just learned, and I have not had time to play with this, but if you duplicate this image, You can also create you can use a black and white or a regular image, and up here you can, well, I'll just do this, you can say create from grayscale. And Unity will attempt to create a normals map from a grayscale image. I haven't played with that. Maybe I'll do another demo on that and see how Unity does its own bump maps, or not a bump map, but a normals map from that on its own without using SS Bump. But I prefer not to. So essentially, we have a couple different things. So that's fine. Let's try the medium here. So that's the only thing we haven't tested yet is our medium. So load that into this one and take a look at the difference between the medium and the large. And there is a little bit of a difference. It's not that bad, though. I mean, if I take a look here, really good place to compare it is these two stones are the same, right here and right here. And so you can see here in this stone how this looks a lot better on large than it does on medium. So here's what I recommend. Using SS Bump will really help your textures come alive. They'll help them cast shadows, as everything's going to look a lot more three-dimensional. So if you have a texture that does not have a normals map, you need that. But be mindful. Fine detail or medium detail may not always be the best. So I would make multiples, try some variables, try some changes, name your files correctly so that you know what you have done. Okay, so if you change the height, put that in the name. If it's fine detail versus medium detail, make sure that's in the name. And then you can always just play with the different types to see which one you like. Now, I made it a little easier myself by doing two stripes of the same texture next to each other on the terrain. Okay, I wouldn't do that if I was actually really building a terrain. I would have that texture just be one. I would load a normals map, see if I liked it. If I didn't, I'd try another one, and I'd have a whole bunch of them here that I could experiment from and see if I liked the differences. And just kind of play with it back and forth. And if I really was stuck, then I might create a new texture, paint it right next to the old one, and do some comparisons and see what I liked. But I don't think you have to do that to get there. And then the other trick is also be mindful of where your directional light is as far as the direction of the directional light is concerned. If I hit the F key here and focus on the directional light for a second, you'll notice, by the way, the location of the directional light does not matter. It can actually be underneath your terrain, and it will do the exact same thing. The position does not matter at all, basically. It's the direction of the directional light. For all intents and purposes, the directional light is infinitely far away. It's a star, it's a sun, it's infinitely far away. But as I start to rotate it, that's when it changes the shadows, and you can see the shadows changing on the little hut that we have there. As I start to rotate it, you can see the major differences that happen. And if I flip it upside down, it goes to nighttime. It's actually really kind of cool, okay? So there are some major things that directional light does for you that's really cool. Seems like rotating it in the Z does nothing. You see that? Because it's rotating around its local Z axis, which goes basically parallel to the light rays themselves. So rotating the Z axis does nothing. It's X and Y that really seems to make a difference with the directional light. If you have a texture and you want it to stand out, and this is a little photographer's trick, and since I'm a photographer, this is something that just comes instinctively to me, but it doesn't for everybody. The light needs to come from the side. So if I zoom back in on our texture here, and if I change my directional light, as the light goes towards the side more, you can actually see it, the skybox is doing a nice effect there. Okay, you can see how the texture is far more dramatic because of the direction of the light. If I take that and I put it to 0, well, that didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Probably need to put it not at 0, but at like 90. Yeah. So if I take that and put it at 90, now I go back to my controller, you'll see that the texture just the normals map is not responding the same, and now the texture does not have a dramatic look. However, let me say this, that's for a texture that's running along the ground. If you had, say, walls on a vertical building, then the texture might look better from a top light versus a side light. So you have to kind of keep in mind that anytime you do a texture with normals mapping, the normals will show up much greater when the light is to the side. So don't do this and evaluate it only based on light that is coming straight down from the top. Change your light a little bit, see which looks best. What I recommend is like a 45-degree angle for your directional light, and that will make everything look a little better, okay? So if I scroll back here and get my directional light there again, okay? If I give it a 45-degree angle, okay, what that'll do is that will create a little bit of side light, a little bit of top light for just about everything. And so that will be a really good mix where the normals will look as good as possible no matter what direction they're growing in, you know, vertical, horizontal, whatever, and you'll be able to see your normals map the best. Okay, so in review really quickly, don't accept just flat textures. Make sure you're putting normals maps on everything. Okay, the degree to which you do that and how high the height is and how severe that is, that's up to you. One of the other things that I didn't play with on this that I have played with before is the intensity. That will also create deeper shadows and a more intense look on the texture. You can easily do too much, so be very careful. And when you're saving your normals maps, okay, make sure that you save them with notations in the title of the file so that as you do some experimentation with this program, you can kind of learn where you were, so to speak, or know where you were so that you can learn where you want to go. How about that? That's really what I should say. You know where you were so that you can learn where you need to go and what changes you need to make with these settings to create the best bump maps. I mean, there's way more in here that you can play with. Blending modes of additive, normal, all that sort of stuff. Honestly, sometimes I'll put it on normal. It creates a harsher look, okay? Additive is the default, and it seems to work better most of the time. If you find things are looking like they're in shadow when you actually want them to be in highlight, you might have to hit the invert height map button. And that'll flip-flop your tones so that what is supposed to be in shadow will become something that's supposed to be in highlight, and vice versa. Okay, so it's a great program. It's really easy to use once you kind of get set to it and you kind of understand how it works. You can't drag and drop, by the way. That's one of the first things that everybody tries, and I'll just tell you, you can't do it. So if I wanted to take my unkempt stone path, I can't drop it. I can't drag it and drop it into the image file location. If I go in here, you can make an image list. I can't drop it in here. You have to add them manually by going through the application itself. That's a little frustrating. Excuse me. A little frustrating. I, would love it if they changed that, but for right now, you have to actually go through and find the image by clicking in the app and going through. The good news is it remembers where you were. So once you add it once, if you've got all your textures in one folder, like you were told to do in a My Textures folder, then it will be very simple. The other thing that's important, and this again should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, is all of these things have to reside inside the Assets folder for Unity. If you do not save these files into the Assets folder in Unity, you will see nothing. And then you'll be confused, and it's because you didn't save them correctly. Any questions? Okay, that's all I have.